Hello, this is Dave Turo Shields, and I'm coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana, and Kenosha Counseling Center. Hope you're doing well tonight. I'd like to talk to you this evening about depression and how to help somebody that has depression. It's important to know that people who love somebody that has depression suffer themselves. They're often exhausted, confused, frustrated, and sometimes afraid to even talk to the depressed person that they love because they don't want to make things worse. Often they walk on eggshells, and this can be a very difficult situation. Um, Depression is a disease, and it can often injure relationships. But make no bones about it, the support around a depressed person is absolutely vital for recovery. The first step for somebody who cares about a depressed person is self-care, and otherwise you'll get burnout. And I know that when I suffered from depression, it was very exhausting for my wife. She would be preoccupied throughout the course of her day, away from me and at work, how I was going to be when she got home. And she would always wonder then, driving home and then out in the car, how are things going to be when she walked in the door? And what would she be able to say or not say? And what kind of shape that I would be in when she came around to kiss me upon entering the house. We had those kind of talks once I entered into recovery and started to get better. She didn't want to bother me with that information until I was in a better place. She kept that all to herself. One of the things that my wife did a great job of throughout the course of my deep depression days was she surrounded herself with support. She has a girlfriend network that's fantastic. She has a social and professional network that's fantastic. She's fairly transparent about how we went through this, and so she knew how to support herself. And I think that's important for you to hear. That it's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay even for you to enter into therapy if you need to, if you don't have the kind of social support that I just been talking about. And if you need that extra support, it's okay to reach out and ask for that for yourself. It's important to understand that depression is an isolating kind of illness, and that you can get sucked into that vacuum as a caregiver yourselves. And that's one of the ways that my wife described herself to my psychiatrist. She said that she felt more like a caregiver than a spouse with me, and that was something that was difficult for me to hear. I felt some shame about that and some guilt as well. And on dark days, that didn't sit well with me. And on some days, it made things worse. And she had no intention for things to feel worse for me, but she was just trying to be honest in my psychiatry sessions that we had. There were times when Christine did seek out her own professional help, and she was grateful that she did so. Um, Here are some things that you can do as a supporter of a depressed person. Be present when the dam breaks. Depressed people aren't often open. They're typically closed to advice giving or any kind of input. It's very difficult to know what to say to them or how to say it. But occasionally, you can have little mini breakthroughs. And when they do open up, it's important to have that timing yourself to be ready to be present and be ready to listen, because these can be little breakthrough moments that get them into treatment. If they're already in treatment, they can take that breakthrough moment into a therapy session the next time they have one, and it can be very beneficial for them. So that's one thing that you can do is to stay unsaturated enough yourself to be, if you're like a sponge and you've been soaking up this depressed person's energy, you're not going to be able to be present for them. So self-care, once again, is very important for you to be able to be in the right mindset and be able to be present for them when the time is right. On a day-to-day basis, what you can do is decide what day you're going to have when you get up. Again, depression is very greedy, and it wants to take everybody around the depressed person down into that same pit. And so you get to decide when you get up on a given morning what kind of day you're going to have. The depressed person is struggling with a disease. It doesn't mean that you have to struggle with the same disease. You can decide to have a good day. You can decide to have a great day. That is up to you. And you can do everything in your power to have that great day on a daily basis. My wife did a lot of things like going to the gym and exercising. She did a lot of things like going out for dinner with friends. She did a lot of things like hosting social get-togethers, which were absolutely painful and awful for me. But I just went away and hid and didn't want to be around people like that because of my anxiety. But she continued to live her life in ways that was good for her, and I could appreciate that. I just couldn't participate in it. And so you can have good days. You don't have to hide and become part of this depression disease with your partner or family member or friend. Small things really matter. So one of the things you can do to help your depressed person is to cook a meal for them, to send a card without a reason, to send a text. My wife would send me texts for no good reasons. You can look up a favorite quote of the day and send that in a text message to your loved one. And those are nice little things that can mean a lot to a depressed person. There's no good reason for sending them, and that's why you're sending them. And so you find your style and find those little ways where you can reach out and show your love for the depressed person that's in your care. One of the things that you could do is to work at stop criticizing the depressed person. They already know and believe that they're a failure. They really know that they're not living up to the kind of standards that they hold to themselves to, and they don't need to be reminded of that. It's rare that you find a depressed person who has a good self-esteem. And so they have a lot of shame. I know I had a lot of shame in my depression and a lot of feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness. And so when you get frustrated with this disease and you start adding to that with criticism, it just makes the depression that much stronger, and it is going to be that much longer before recovery happens. And so do your best. And when you feel critical, that's usually a reflection that you're not taking good care of yourself. So you have to take a breath, go do something for yourself, take a walk, call a girlfriend, call a guy that's a friend, if you're a male, and take care of yourself. You deserve to do that, and it'll help you not be so critical. Tough love doesn't work with depressed people. We used to talk about tough love in addiction work, and I'm not sure it works with addiction work either. It's an old model. It's a reflection of you becoming highly frustrated with this disease and with the person that you love. It just doesn't work. It makes matters worse. Don't listen to somebody who's giving you the advice of to be showing tough love to your depressed person. It just doesn't work. The shame gets worse. The hopelessness gets worse. The worthlessness gets worse. It just won't work. Trust me on that one. Another thing to be careful of is don't minimize the depressed person's experience. If you've never had a major depression, clinical depression, a deep, crippling depression, you don't know what it's like to be depressed. And so don't minimize the experience of a depressed person. When you do that, when you try to take away that person's experience, they feel more isolated, they feel more alone. And that's just not something that we want to increase for that person. They're probably already struggling with thoughts of suicide, and this can push them closer to that edge. And so it's really important that you not minimize their experience. The other thing to be careful of is not to give advice. It's easy to give advice. Often you feel compelled and powerless over what's happening to this person right in front of you. And so the one of the things you want to do is you want to make things better. And you can make things better by many of the things I've already shared with you tonight. One of the things to try to be careful of is giving advice. because that will shut down the depressed person. They'll lock up and freeze. I know I did this as my wife would start to run into her CBT strategies, and I would just lock up, and I'd go away in my head and in my heart, and the conversation would be over. And so what you can do is you can ask open-ended questions, and Christine became better at this as she practiced. And so you might ask a question like, "What can I do to help you feel better?" And that's an open-ended question that might work. It's not guaranteed to work, but it might work better than advice giving and trying to be directive and those kinds of things. And it might open up a good conversation in therapy. Sometimes if your depressed person's in therapy, you can attend a session with them, and that kind of question can be good for the therapy room as well. So the last thing I want to talk about is being patient. It's not easy to be patient. This disease can go on a long time. I know that my crippling, bone-crushing depression lasted about 7 years, and that is a very long time. I went through several treatments during that time, and it didn't seem to work for a long time. And then finally, it started to work. And so my wife had to work on patience for a very long time. I think she ran out of patience a bunch of times as well. But she found a way to keep having hope in our marriage, to keep having hope that I would get better. And it's finally paying off. And I'm glad she didn't give up. And so please don't give up. Your depressed person needs you and loves you. And they just may not be able to show it in the best of ways right now. And you're worth saving too. And so I hope you take good care of yourself so that you can be there for your loved one who's depressed. That's all for tonight. Thanks for checking in. God bless.